Chapter 1. Lahan and Samfin. They could see a crowd at the port. Everyone had come to greet the great ships that now sat in the harbour. The emperor's younger brother was returning from the western capital after almost a year away. No wonder everyone wanted to be there. Lahan was one of those who had come to greet the imperial younger brother. Now he observed the ships from his carriage. "Master Lahan, may I park the carriage here?" a polite voice asked. It was Samfin, that is, number 3. She was a young woman Lahan's age, but she wore men's clothing and kept her hair neatly trimmed. If one didn't know better, she probably would have looked like a particularly handsome young man. As to why her name was a number, it was because Lahan's adoptive father, Lakan, couldn't remember names. Samfin was the third person he'd taken under his wing because he could see potential in her, so she was simply called number 3. Samfin was in fact the daughter of a merchant family. After she had run from her parents, chosen marriage match in disgust, she'd come to Lakan and given him a hard sell on her skills. Normally he would have turned her away immediately, but she had commercial knowledge as befitting the daughter of a merchant, and so he took her in. Currently, Lahan and Samfin were busy working their side hustles to repay Lakan's debts. Samfin wore men's clothing in part to prevent people from underestimating her just because she was a woman. It was also in part a reaction to her parents' attempt to force an unwanted match on her. Park right near the port if you would. If you mention my honoured father's name, they will let us through. Very well. Lahan took out a golden plaque inscribed with the character La. Ordinarily, such a thing belonged with the head of the clan, but if they gave it to Lakan he would only lose it, so Lahan kept it on his behalf. Under any other circumstances that would have been unthinkable, but with Lakan the unthinkable was par for the course. Some people joked that with that plaque, Lahan could make a bid for control of the clan anytime he wished. But Lahan knew better than anyone that if he made a play for the family headship, it was he who would be crushed. He also had no interest in taking over. He was working hard to pay off Lakan's debts and he was very filial. Incidentally, were there no other drivers available? Lahan asked. Samfin was holding the reins herself, which meant talking through the small window to the driver's bench. It wasn't easy to have a conversation that way. Oh no, not really. Hiring a driver would have cost money and I had time to kill anyway. Waste not, want not, right, I suppose. But when I'm with Yiffen and Irfan there's always a driver. It seemed that only when he asked Samfin for something were no drivers available and she came instead. Oh, she seemed to be playing dumb. Lahan decided to let it pass. Samfin parked the carriage and got down from the driver's bench. Lahan got out as well, leaving the carriage with one of the bodyguards who had come with him. The passengers were just getting off the ship, so finding Lakan was easy. The shouting and swooning were coming from where the imperial younger brother was. Lakan could be found in the strangely deserted, quiet part of the dock. Nobody who knew Lakan's reputation would get too close to him if they didn't need to. "Excuse me, thank you, let me through, please," Lahan said, working his way toward Lakan. The old guy stood on the far side of a wall of people, looking beaten. In fact, the crowd had formed a perfectly circular buffer around him. It was rather funny. Lakan's aide Onsu was leading him along. Lakan was not one for moving vehicles. He could survive a carriage, but a ship was too much for him. Lahan himself was badly prone to seasickness, and moments like this reminded him that the two of them were truly connected by blood. "Sir Lahan," Onsu said when he noticed him. He looked even more tired than the last time Lahan had seen him. His year's service in the western capital must have been trying. "I've come to meet my father," Lahan said. "It doesn't seem he will be much good to anyone for a while. I would like to take him home if you have no objection." In principle, Lakan was a high official. He should probably have put in an appearance at his office to report after his return to the royal capital. "None at all, sir, if you would be so kind. I will inform the Moon Prince for you." Onsu looked positively relieved. "I think he will agree that this was the easiest way. I think he might." Lahan had one of the bodyguards carry his pale-faced father to the carriage. Now he muttered to himself, "Am I going to ride in the same carriage as my honoured father?" If he were honest, he wasn't eager to be in there, where the air would be perfumed with the smell of stomach juices and other filth. Instead, once Lakan had been safely pitched into the carriage, Lahan climbed up on the driver's bench. "Master Lahan," Samfin said, "I realise it's a bit tight up here, but we will survive. I'm afraid that if I ride back there with my father I might be sick to my stomach." Much as he felt bad for Samfin, Lahan could not ride a horse by himself. He also did not have the stamina to walk all the way home. By process of elimination, that left sitting on the driver's bench beside Samfin. Sigh, He would have liked to pay his respects to the Moon Prince, but so it goes. Next time, even if he forced his way into the crowd, he would inevitably be lost among the adoring throng. Lahan knew that he was just a plain-looking man, undistinguished in appearance and not even especially tall. In order to get people's attention, someone like him needed the proper stage to demonstrate his abilities, as well as information that the other person would be interested in. One needed more than just a fancy outfit. One could not simply overdress. Without anything to back it up, that would only make one look comical. No, this was just like investing. Never let a good opportunity slip through your fingers. That was the key. The Moon Prince was a discerning man, not easily fooled. Lahan could not abide someone who was beautiful on the outside but not the inside. From that perspective, the Moon Prince seemed to have been crafted by heaven itself specifically to meet Lahan's ideal. A whole year, he mumbled. I wonder if Maomao's at least got one in the oven. His younger sister occurred to him almost as an afterthought. Much as he might have liked to speak with her immediately, he would have to do something about the cargo in his carriage first. Master Lahan, shall I contact Lady Maomao? Sanfan asked. Would you? I'll ask her to stop by the mansion. I wonder if she will. I'll write that you wish to speak with her about the matter of her friends, although she might ignore you even then. Lahan thought about it for a second, then said, Very well, thank you. Please do. Sanfan frequently wrote letters on Lahan's behalf, at least when they were straightforward enough. Maomao didn't know Sanfan, but Sanfan knew about Maomao. Their acquaintance only went one way. I will. We need Lady Maomao to come collect them as soon as she may, Sanfan said, sounding oddly subdued. As to who they were, the answer was apparent the moment the carriage arrived back at the mansion. Two women were standing by the weird shogi piece-shaped object outside. Master Lahan, said the taller, slimmer one approaching the carriage. Her name was Yao, and although she was still only 17, she was taller than Lahan. Behind her, looking on with a proper glower on her face, was Nen. These were the friends of Maomao to whom Sanfan had alluded. Lahan had allowed them to stay at the mansion once in order to have a favour he could call in with Maomao, but it had been his mistake. For some reason, the two of them had never left. How was Maomao? Yao asked, and her face was so perfect that even when worried, she looked positively lovely. However, that was all. Lahan heard alarm bells going off in his head. He knew he couldn't get any closer to Yao. I only went to bring my honoured father back, Lahan replied from a safe distance. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to collect my little sister. I believe I told you that when I left, didn't I? The closer he got to Yao, the more frightening her servant Nen's face became. Oh, Yao said, letting her hair droop over her ears and looking dejected. For some reason, Nen was still glaring at Lahan. She seemed to think it was his fault that Yao was upset. What was he supposed to do? Is there anything else you want? Sanfan asked, her eyes narrowed. If we stand out here talking, we will keep the master of the house waiting forever. Her tone was distinctly prickly. No, there is not. You must pardon me. Yao narrowed her eyes right back while Nen gave a brittle smile. Further, I believe the agreement was that you would stay here until Lady Maomao returned. Out of your concern for her, yes. I will arrange porters for you, so be sure to pack your luggage. Sanfan said this with an open and easy smile. Since Lady Maomao has safely come home, you must no longer have the slightest bit of interest in this household. He couldn't quite put his finger on why, but Lahan's sixth sense told him that he was standing in the middle of a battlefield. Yes, Yao said, thinking about something. Could you perchance give us a few days? We have stayed here for so long that putting our bags together will be a time-consuming project. Heavens, and here I assumed your so capable lady-in-waiting would have everything ready. You know, I thought I heard that a relative of yours had gone to the western capital as well. Wouldn't you normally prioritize greeting them over Lady Maomao? You heard right, but my uncle is going to stay in the western capital for the time being. The situation has his household in such a tizzy that there's no place for me there. What was going on here? Their exchange sounded polite, yet Lahan could see sparks between Yao and Sanfan. He also noticed Nen continuing to glare at him. In any case, Lahan found himself with one goal: to get out of there as fast as he could. He hopped down from the driver's bench and called one of the nearby servants. Is a bedroom ready for my father? Make some congee, something easy on the stomach. Also get some sweets, but nothing too fatty. Some fruit might be a good idea. Make sure the fruit juice is nice and cold. Yes, sir, the servant responded. All right, I'm going to go take care of the rest of my work. Lahan trotted briskly away from the scene, trying not to look like he was fleeing. Chapter 2, Lahan and the Dangling Corpse, Part 1. For Lahan, it was simultaneously a good thing and a bad thing to have his father back from the western capital. You must go to your office today, honored father. You should put up a good front at least on your first day back, Lahan said as he watched Lakan drowsily eat his congee. 3 children stood beside Lakan. From biggest to smallest, they had been dubbed Sifan, Woofan and Liufan numbers 4, 5 and 6. They were a trio of orphans Lakan had picked up somewhere, and they now performed menial chores around the house. Sifan was assiduously bringing the spoon to Lakan's mouth. Lakan was really just being lazy, but the wrong onlooker might have thought he had a thing for young boys. Had he been forced to feed himself, however, he would have drawn the meal out forever, much like a kid, in fact. So this was how it would be. In addition to the other 3 children was another boy, not yet old enough for his coming-of-age ceremony. He was substantially smaller even than Lahan. Lahan didn't recognize the boy, but he had appeared the day before, saying he had been instructed to serve Lakan. His facial features showed he came from Isay province, but why he had come was less obvious. Pardon my asking, but who are you? Lahan said. Did my honored father collect you? Lakan had a certain habit of just finding people. The boy could have arrived that way. That would be all well and good if he was an orphan, but if he had parents, then it became a kidnapping. If you want to go back to the western capital, just tell me. It's my father's mess, but as his relative, I'll take responsibility for making sure you get back. Having the head of the clan back got Lahan out of a number of responsibilities, but it also vastly increased the number of problems he would have to solve. Getting a single child back home was easy enough, though. Compared to compensating for an attempt to smash down the walls of the rear palace, he would manage. Not at all, sir. I have come to work. The Moon Prince commanded me to look after Master Lakan for the time being. Lahan had no idea why the Moon Prince would have ordered that, but he said, I see. May I ask your name then? Certainly. I am called Kanjunji. Kanjunji, his name explained everything. Lahan was a quick thinker, and when he heard this familiar moniker, he connected it with the fact that his own older brother had not returned from the western capital. Why was his brother there while this boy Lahan had never seen was here? Now he understood. His brother and this boy shared the same family name and the same given name, so they must have been mistakenly swapped. It was patently ridiculous, but that was exactly the kind of star under which Lahan's older brother had been born. Now I get it. Lahan nodded. In his opinion, his brother was a real jack of all trades, but a master of none except for pulling the short straw, if that were a trade. He had been left behind in a far land and was probably working industriously at that very moment. Lahan bore no ill will toward his older brother. In fact, he thought he was quite a good brother and hoped to introduce him to a pretty girl someday. Sanfan came into the room. Master Lahan, she said. Yes, what? I'm terribly sorry, but I found this among the master's clothing, and I thought you'd want to see it. Sanfan held out a letter that smelled of a simple but high-class perfume. The sender wasn't immediately apparent, but Lahan could tell who it was from the writing. The characters were lovely, with just a hint of strength in them. It was a message from the Moon Prince to Lahan, explaining who Kanjunji was and why he was there in terms at once indirect and apologetic. It was largely as Lahan had surmised. Once his brother had returned to the central region, they would send Kanjunji back home. The Moon Prince wished the boy to remain in Lakan's care until that time. With apologies to his brother, Lahan jumped at the chance to have the Moon Prince in his debt. He would love to do more favors for him, in fact, more and more until there were so many they could never be repaid. Lakan had finally finished his congee and Sifan was wiping his mouth. Woofan and Liufan brought him his dessert fruit. Honored father, Lahan began, before you go to court, I'd like to inform you of a few things that are currently going on. HRM. Everyone's still doing their jobs, aren't they? Well, with you gone for a whole year, some breakdown was inevitable. Lahan placed a shogi board in front of Lakan. Lakan thought of his subordinates as pieces in a game and indicated their disposition via the board. It had confused Lahan as much as anyone at first, but after seeing it time and time again, he'd begun to discern certain rules. He wasn't perfect at it, but he could largely understand what Lakan wanted to communicate from the board. How are the pieces moving? Lakan asked. Well, you see, this one has gone here, and this has moved here. Lahan moved a silver general inside the enemy camp and took away a pawn. At the same time, a lance was stolen by a bishop. The lance, it always had good spirit but seemed like a liar. As a matter of politics, Lakan never joined any faction. However, it was only natural for a faction to form around him, even if that was never his intention. During his absence, his faction had exerted enough pressure to keep opposing groups from running roughshod, but over the course of an entire year, the unwritten rule that one should never cross Lacan had all but eroded. One of Lacan's subordinates had gone over to another faction. At the same time, his own group had succeeded in drawing someone from another group to them. Before he'd left for the western capital, Lacan had given just one order to his people. He said, "When I get back, I want everything to be exactly the same as when I left." The result of that order had been the loss of a lance and the taking of a pawn. No doubt his subordinates awaited his return with fear and trembling. Lacan had a thought. Perhaps it had simply been too much to ask a bunch of soldiers, people not normally versed in political negotiations, to maintain the balance of power within the court. He thought they should still get passing marks, but there was no telling how Lacan would react. "I suppose we should at least see this pawn we've picked up," Lacan said. "Certainly." Lahan picked up a brush. Wufan and Liufan brought ink and paper, and then he wrote out the orders in such a way that the aide Onsu would be able to understand them. He felt bad for Onsu, telling him to come to work the very day after he had finally gotten to see his wife and child for the first time in a year. But from the moment one became Lacan's assistant, there was no such thing as time off. The boy with the exact same name as Lahan's brother was agog from the moment he got out of the carriage. "This is the royal court. My, it's so much bigger than the administrative office in the western capital." Lahan had been thinking about what to do with the boy. Normally, he might have simply left him with Sanfan, but there was a problem. His freeloaders Ahem, Yao and Enen had stuck their noses in. They had made a big show of doting on the boy Junji. Sanfan and Yao did not get along very well, and sparks constantly flew between them. Lahan had no idea why, or at least he wanted to pretend he didn't. In any case, Lacan and the boy seemed to get along all right. So Lahan had decided to assign him to Lacan as a sort of junior assistant. If that made Onsu's burden lighter, it meant Lahan wouldn't have quite so much paperwork piling up, for which he would be grateful. Still, he had trouble imagining it would go as smoothly as all that. "Say, Enen, are my bangs straight? They're perfect. You look as beautiful as always." From behind Lahan came the voices of his freeloaders. Since they were sending Lacan by carriage, it had been decided to let the young ladies come along. He could hardly have put himself and his father in a vehicle while the women walked. "Master Lahan, it's all well and good to be courteous to women, but I don't think you had to go quite so far," Sanfan whispered to him. She was driving them again. Honestly, it would have been more efficient to have her do other work, but Sanfan wouldn't hear of it. "That's not your decision to make, Sanfan," Lahan said. After a moment she replied, "Understood. All right, I'm going to take my father to his office." Starting tomorrow he was going to leave Lacan with Onsu. Lahan certainly wasn't going to spend her days babysitting him. "Enen, let's go to the medical office," said Yao. That would get the two of them out of the way, which was something of a relief. Now that Maomao was back, Lahan fully intended to have them return to their dormitory. "See you later, Junji." Yao cooed. "You too. Good luck at work today, Lady Yao. Lady Enen. Gosh, you don't have to be so formal." Yao was surprisingly familiar with Junji herself, and just when Lahan had been so sure she didn't like men, maybe it was because the boy was still so young that she was able to show him some decency. "You'll be helping your brother and your uncle now." Yao and Enen were about to leave when Lahan motioned them to stop. "Pardon me, but the two of you seem to be under some sort of misapprehension." "What do you mean?" Yao asked, tilting her head. Young Junji supplied the answer himself. "Ma'am, my surname is Kan, but I'm not related to Master Lacan or Master Lahan." "Really? I heard what Master Lacan said yesterday. He said Junji." "I think he's my nephew," Enen said, doing an uncannily accurate impression of Lacan. Come to think of it, she'd been making a midnight snack the night before. Had she been trying to endear herself to Lacan? Lahan shivered at the thought. "He's not wrong, but he's completely wrong," Lahan informed them. "We're out of time at the moment, so I'll explain later." It was nothing short of a miracle that Lacan had remembered the name of Lahan's biological older brother. He had not, however, managed to remember the man's face. Thus he had presumably classified young Junji as "he doesn't not seem different somehow, but he's probably my nephew." Both of them were studious, hard workers, so perhaps they appeared to him similarly. Lahan was seized by a fresh desire to help his brother settle down as soon as he could. Is my name causing any problems?" Junji looked deeply uneasy. Lahan, Yao and Enen all looked at each other. It's all very complicated. Don't worry yourself. More importantly, my honoured father has fallen asleep again, so give him a good shove, would you?" Lahan said. "Yes, sir," Junji said, and he and Lahan proceeded to shove the sleeping Lacan's back. Lahan was supposed to be done worrying about Lakan once he had deposited him at his office, but there was an unusual hubbub when they arrived. A crowd had formed. Well now, Lahan said, what do you suppose is the matter? Young Junji asked. They looked at each other. Onsu stood outside the office, and now just hours after getting home he already had a very grim look on his face. Sir Onsu, whatever seems to be the matter? Lahan asked. Sir Lahan, perhaps you should see for yourself. Onsu indicated the office with a significant glance. It would be quicker than explaining, he seemed to say. Lahan looked. Well, I'll be. Something very unbeautiful hung there. Namely, a man's corpse dangling by the neck from one of the rafters. Heek, young Junji said, terribly frightened.